Good morning, everyone. Really appreciate you attending our session today. We already have a reasonable number of attendees on already, so we're going to start with Amir from Microsoft to talk about Purview, some experience with Purview deployments, and then we'll finish off with Shrikant and Henry discussing some of the resources that will help you deploy Purview and then some services as well. So without further ado, I'd love to hand over to Amir Jafarian, who is the Microsoft Product Manager for Security. We're really fortunate to have him joining us today. So over to you, Amir.
Thank you. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yes, Michael mentioned, I'm product manager from Microsoft Security Product Group, and today we are going to talk about Purview. Today's session, I'm trying to jump onto it's more about deployment, how we look at the best practice on the Purview deployment for especially for SMB and a smaller segment, and hopefully less slide. Okay, with that, and I'm going to tell jump onto different things. Going to portal, I'm going to share some links which I think it's going to be valuable. So that's the start of the call today, right? Hopefully it will be we get something out of it today which you can benefit from your Purview deployment. Okay, let's start. I'm sharing my screen, and while I said less slide, I have to start with the slide first.
No pressure on you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Purview from best practice deployment guide. You may all know about Purview. We are not talking about what is Purview. Purview is great on this data security, governance, all those things. But we just work on the basic, right? When we talk about Purview, so we all know about we are going to talk about labeling. It's always in the Purview 3 main features. I'm focusing today, or 2 more, 1 less, is MIP, Microsoft Information Protection, DLP, data loss prevention, and then we have IRM, insider risk management, focusing on data security, not governance today. With that, so when we talk about MIP, we talk about label, and so it means about when we talk about labels, it means about what type of label I'm going to use for my documents, my data. It can be database, it can be non-office documents, and then which sort of the tagging, that's MIP covering it, and then what I'm going to do with the data, right? And with that, this is what we are one holistically look at, okay, with MIP and DLP and IRM, what I'm going to achieve. So what is the best practice to use it? And it's like how complex it can be, or it can, of course, it can go super complex, or do we need that complexity for smaller segments? And based on all of this, MIP, DLP, where we cover later, we build this best data security deployment best practice guide for Business Premium plus Purview Suite. And this is my team is working on, and there are some other content we also built. It's focusing on this area. And why we did that, so when I started working with partners, my role is partner facing. So it's like from engineering side, working with partner means talk to partners, listen to them, and see how we can what's the challenge they're facing, especially in the smaller customer size, and then how we can help them. And what I heard in most of the call when I started maybe a year and a half ago, and then for first year it was all those conversations with talking to partners, trying to help them. That was part of the learn. And what happened all of a sudden, Purview is complex, and we want something like prescriptive guide, something it doesn't We want to have something to start with as a baseline, and then build on top of that. And that's where it all came from. So those feedback converted, we built V-team inside our team to work on those content, focusing on what we are seeing today. The link is all available publicly. I mean, just, I can share this link in the chat, which is, you get all the links. This is, and I'm showing you Purview today, but this is more than Purview. I'm not sure if I use in chat. I mean, I leave it in chat for whoever moderate this can share with the rest. So the link I'm sharing, hopefully you get access to that, is like it gives you access to all of this best practice. What you see today is data security, but there you see MDE, MDO, MDA, and device security and identity, all is there. So we built same for everything. Okay. And how we build it, let's just jump onto some of the pages. Again, I don't want to read over a slide. In data security with Microsoft Purview. And it's just, again, these are some slides where it talks about the difference between Business Premium and Purview Suite. But this is how we do it. It's like when we are going to deploy, what is the baseline? Think of like, good, better, best. But in this case, if you look at the, priority 2, you see the governance, retention policy. I'm going to skip. I'm not talking about retention or governance at all, and focusing on the good and best. And based on that, it's like, when you create, when you work with your customers, and then you set up you want to start setting up Purview, some basics there which may not be enabled by default, right? We're just trying to make sure we tick all those boxes. And that's where, if you can see, it's like talking about enabled audit log. Maybe it's obvious, but if you miss it, you are missing a lot of signals. And then with the Purview, it's then the next part is about sensitivity labels, like what labels we want to define, and then label priority, and what label needs to be published to the end users. So we don't have to, when we, when you create a label, right? And then you may say, okay, I have an idea of your Microsoft. If you go, for example, build a tenant in Australia, you see there is a tenant with no label, right? And then you get the option, one click in the DSPM to create those labels for you, which create, I think, 16 labels. Now the question is, 16 labels. I have a customer with 50 seats, 20 seats. Do I need to bring those 16 labels to all those users? Right? What can we do there? This is where we came here and we said, let's start with this and what we should think about for our customers, because as a partner, you are going to, especially partners dealing with 100 customers, 200 customers, 50 customers, you want to have some baseline in place without even, you may not need to even ask them about it, because that's like your standard offering. And then when you go to advanced, of course, you can customize it, you can change the labels and all those conversations. And focus to start with on the baseline is about what is the minimum we want to deploy. And from those 16, you decide about 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever labels to publish to the user. And you think about the publishing, and then where the label is going to be available. And if you follow these guides, you just create all of this. It has a screenshot, this is step 1, create this, do this, do this, do that, and then like that, and then go to the end. And then you have, DLP based on that. And that is also, we are going to cover actually how we look at those DLP, because the goal with this is when we deploy this, we want to make sure we have least impact on the end users to start with. Of course, later we want to have impact, but not to start. And later, when you are going to deploy Purview, you come up to the DLP for DLP for endpoint devices, Teams, Copilot, and some other advanced scenario like auto labeling. I started with this. I didn't go to the by considering today we are in this session today, we have at least we have everyone familiar with just what label is. We want to focus on more how label being used, right? Hopefully I'm okay, because I see that this session is like, it says L200 to 300, assuming the L100 is already passed. That's my assumption. Hopefully it's okay to go this way, but correct me if you want me to go back and talk about a bit on more on MIP and DLP or label itself. Okay, so there again, this is all covered about, I'm going to quickly go through this. I'm not going to talk over a slide. I just want to quickly show you this and then go back to other content I'm going to talk about. Okay, so this is, as you can see, if you follow this, it's just about it's a step-by-step guide to enable. Talks about labels and then publishing of labels, and goes to all deployment. Okay, so what also I did, I had a chance to work with a partner recently, and then it was about, rolling out Purview for about 100 customers in a short period of time. So based on that's where actually it helped me to test this concept with with the partner and the customers, and said, okay, we decided to go and build based on this. And of course, as a partner, you can tweak it, right? It's like you can change it the way you want, but the goal is like having this baseline with minimize impact on the end users. And then we did that, and then we used some multi-tenant management tools to deploy 200 customers in, let's say, technically we did 1 and then 5 and then 90-ish customers in 1 day at the last part of the project. Now let's come back to, I have another slide. I want to show you the thought process behind this, and I want to talk about more how I think when we talk about Purview. And then here I'm going to also talk about more about the concept, even if it's new to you, or I'll try to explain what each phase is, and then how we should think about it. As I said, with the Purview, we always start with the label MIP, right? With the MIP, what you look at is technically MIP is where you want to have a tools where you tag your data, right? The tag is the label, right? So I have documents include, for example, credit card, and if it has a credit card information, then it is highly confidential. If the documents, or let's say it's confidential, and if it has 100 credit cards in one document, then it's highly confidential. Again, this is just example, right? So you may know what exactly is going to be confidential or highly confidential, because that's what the label is going to help you with. But if you don't know what you can do, because the goal is to start with Purview to label. Now, one of the challenge initially when I had those conversations with the partners, okay, what label should I use? I need auto labeling to label my documents, so to be ready. But now the question is, if you have auto labeling, can you do the apply auto labeling today? Because that requires knowing your data very well. So you may, even if you have the auto label, you may not want to start with it unless you exactly know what that means for the business. What else we can do then? And here is where we decide about we have another feature in Purview or MIP. It's a default label. And I'm going to actually show you and create a label. Instead of going through the slide again, I'm going to actually go to the portal and show you. So we have a default label. We use the default label to say any new documents created, get a label. And that default label, you can have a default label and define the default label per product. And you can say email get this default label, and files, Office files get different label, and then PowerPoints or SharePoint sites can also get different labels. So you can define that, and then when you implement that default label and then publish those labels as per this policy is defined there. So what you get is you get the files or new files or edited files with the label. Right? This helps, in future when you have the better idea about what type of label you're going to apply to existing documents. There are, of course, on-demand labeling. There are auto-labeling available, client-side auto-labeling, server-side auto-labeling, all those features available to help you with label. You also get discovery of the data, so you can go to Purview and see actually what is already there. But as you can tell by now, the label is critical piece of this Purview deployment. And those decision on what is going to be available to user and what is going to be default always defined in when you publish the label. And in the publishing is where you define the defaults. And also the label can come with protection in the Purview, right? So if you are new to Purview, so think of like the way we do file level permission. We have where you have folder or SharePoint size is protected by group. The label also can apply protection. Label means when you apply the protection to the files by label, that means this is not based on the folder, based on the SharePoint or container. It's inside the file. So if you copy the file and then copy the file to USB and take it somewhere else, and then if you don't have the authentication, the credential needed to open that file is going to be encrypted, is not available. So technically, if someone copy whole file server data where has protected content and then get outside and they try to open it is not usable for them, right? Because they need the credential. That's where the identity comes in, where it's critical to have the good control over authentication and authorization, which is Entra ID and all those authentication strengths we define. With the protection, there are some challenges. You should know, because as soon as you apply protection, you have end user impact on the because again there are some experience is going to change. So that's what we are going to talk about today, and also talk about best practices, what you should think about. Because today's session is not about just what is what, it's about when you do it, what happens to your end user, how you should think about it. And the label protection, I use the file server example, I use container example, but please don't use this protection as replacement for that. This is not for that, and you shouldn't go through, so many different protection policy or labeling says, this is cannot be accessed by this user or group. Usually that's not the way you do it. It's more about think of like as a baseline, you want to say, okay, what is internal, what is not internal. And then when you apply the label, especially when you start the project, there is always, every document, for example, created when you say default is confidential, and then confidential has a policy to say confidential cannot go out of the business. Then the next part is like, what if someone needs to share that confidential outside because that person thinks this shouldn't be confidential? So that's where you decide about the downgrade control. So MIP give you the option to downgrade. And with downgrade, so it's audited. So it's not about I'm protecting users, it's not about all those restrictions. Think of when you start Purview is about insights. So why my users want 10% of my documents or 50% or 80% of my documents has to be downgraded. So based on if it's 5% or 50% or 90%, definitely you get different idea about how you go next, right? So that's where the auditing is there, Activity Explorer is there. So we can go through, how you can benefit from those reports. And to get those insights, you need to deploy something on day one, right? That's, again, back to that baseline conversation. And then we define the boundaries, right? So we now, so far, we have the labels, we have our documents or contents labeled, and what else I want to do with that. So what is the label for? The label can be part of the condition to define what happened to that content from the oversharing perspective, or AI control applies to that, and then and endpoint control and endpoint leak control. All is label is one of the components. Of course, I say label because label is easier to work with. There are you can also have policy based on the sensitive info type, which is about the content itself, is not about the file. And what happened here is in the default model, we define in that documents. Think of like when you have create new documents, that documents is by default is confidential, and that confidential has a boundary of internal. So it means this is for internal usage, and the general is the one that can go out. And then on the AI governance, it's going to be, when I say AI governance technically, it's most of it is a DLP, right? It's endpoint DLP. So you want to send the documents or upload the documents to ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Google, wherever, Gemini, and then say, summarize this document for me, but that document is confidential. So you don't want anyone to upload confidential documents, which is defined by label, to Gemini or ChatGPT or even Microsoft, Copilot, the commercial version of it, consumer version of it, right, to be processed. We want to have it just, processed by Copilot. And then you may also want to say, I don't want my highly confidential documents to be even accessed by M365 Copilot, right? Those are the governance you have in place with Purview. Okay, so and what we are trying to achieve is like, based on the label we define. For example, let's say we have 15 labels, 16 labels. We publish 4 labels: public, general, confidential, and highly confidential. And then we define with the DLP, we define the boundary. So if something is confidential, on the DLP, we can have, exchange rule or SharePoint sharing rules created by DLP, where it's going to stop users sharing confidential to outside, including generative AI. So with this also, you have endpoint DLP, which you have the control inside the boundary, not outside. So inside the boundary, you also control about device, copy to USB or print, copy, upload, something like that. That control is going to be on endpoint. And then AI governance is, which was mentioned about M365 Copilot, is not able to process highly confidential file. And these are, so you can deploy all of this in simulation, right? So to get insights. So if you think of like, you deploy something to your customer, and then in a month, you can tell, go back to them easily, you get a report, say, you processed 1,000 files, this many are downgraded, this many of confidential file shared outside the business. And of course, there are simulations. You just see if those, those 10%, 20% of block sent outside is going to be blocked if I enable, move from simulation to enforce. And also with AI governance, is not just about uploading documents to AI. Think of, you have M365 Copilot, someone in the business working on a confidential project, and they want to make sure Copilot is never going to process that documents if someone asks about it, right? Because yes, of course, the permission is going to be always, permission is going to be for the, the permission is there on the documents, and Copilot respect it, but the problem is you create a OneDrive link and then share with the organization, right? And then this is, for some reason, is shared, instead of sharing with single user, shared with org. And then if the file can be accessed by Copilot, it's going to be processed, right? That's a problem which you want to prevent. And how it works, you define in Copilot, says, any file where when the Copilot is going to access, SharePoint, if something is labeled as highly confidential, is going to be excluded. Okay. I'm not sure if we have any question. Please let me know if there is anything you want, whoever moderate this, let me know if there is any questions and you want to cover that. I'm okay to just, please stop me.
Amir, sorry, I think I do have a question. I think that's a
Yes.
very good scenario. Like some partners also reach out to me saying, in some SharePoint site, they want they want everyone to be able to use Copilot to access those information, but to a level that only the CFO, CEO, or a few senior leaderships can use Copilot to to ask some very confidential information in that SharePoint website. Yeah, I'm not sure whether this is something that can be feasible. Like we have the SharePoint Advanced Management as well, together with DSPM. What would be the recommended approach in this scenario?
So you mean you wanna everyone have access to the SharePoint sites, but limit something to some executives? That's what you mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is this possible?
I mean, so it depends what lens you are looking at it. It's like, for example, when we talk about Copilot processing the content, it's not about SharePoint sites, it's about the label, right? So you say, for example, in this SharePoint sites, anything is highly confidential, then it's going to be not processed by Copilot. From the permission perspective, in that SharePoint sites, or let's say file server, where you have some documents you want to be only available to executives, not everyone. While they all have access to the files, it has to be just limited to finance team or executives or something like that. That's label protection can help, because label protection, it's not about here, this conversation it's not about Copilot. You can't tell I don't think you can tell Copilot, for example, based on the user role and then the content have different response. That's not the case, but you can say, these files, even if it's the location, everyone can access that location, but they cannot open it because the protection is blocking them.
Amir, there's a couple of questions in here from Cam Chapman. I'm not sure if you've answered them already. So I'm just going to ask the first one. And Cam asked, or Cam's interested on thoughts for applying labeling to existing files as a batch. He's used auto labeling before. Are there other options? That's the first question.
Yes, there is an on-demand option. So you can on-demand you can actually if you want to go to historical data, right? The best option is going to run on-demand label. I can show you. Let me just we've been into this conversation. Let me in this one.
And then following this, I'll ask the second question, and then I'll let you get back into it, and then I'll ask the third one, which has just come up from Tausif Mohammed. So I'll ask the second one for Cam shortly, and then we'll have another question session a little later.
Okay. Let me just now, talk about. Let's work inside the UI now. Here, just go to. Yeah, so on-demand classification is the feature you can use. It's a on-demand classification. So you have, auto labeling policy. Of course, you can target endpoint. When some documents get changed, it's automatically get labeled. But if you want to have, the best option is going to be this one, which goes to all historical data and scan. But there is a pay-as-you-go cost for this. It's not part of Purview Suite when you run this. I'm not good with licensing, but I think this is there is a small cost in it. It's not a huge cost, but based on, of course, if you have terabytes of data, it's going to be cost more. But that's for on demand. I don't want to go to cost or anything. Just answer the questions. Which is there a way? Yes, that's the way you can do it, where you can have on demand. So you want to go next one, Tom?
Yeah, I'll ask the second question, then I'll have a pause so you can keep on going. The second question is, you may have answered this, but probably a slightly different version. So do you have guidelines on how to inherit a default label for all new SharePoint sites? So a typical use case will be a new team's site is created, and they need to have a default sensitivity label that will be applied by default to all content created in that site.
Okay, yeah, I show you how it works. I just keep it open and then just make sure I'm not missing this. I'll cover that. You can apply default label to library, and then from there, everything copied there is going to get that label. Okay. We talked about label publishing. I want to just go to the UI now, show them, some of the, what we talked about, and then also use the example Tom just shared that question to show you, how we can actually do that as an example to the library. Now here, labels. So this is MIP, Microsoft Information Protection. We have all those labels created by default, not everything created by default. Some tests, but we have this label. So from this label, but when you look at the label, let me just open one. I just opened this one because this is the key part, right? So you create the label, and then what means by creating label? So when you create a label, you can you want to also, one of the style I recommend to use is like using a traffic light, green, blue, red, yellow, 3, just based on how many labels you have, you can apply the color to the label. And then where the label can be used, files, emails, group and sites. By default, group and sites is grayed out. So if you again follow the documents or that slide I'm sharing, you get access, the link I shared. So it has a script you need to enable, because there is a relation between Entra and this. So it's like enable label for container means the label has to be enabled for groups first, because everything you create is this group. So when that happens, then you get this option available. So yeah, if you don't see this here, you see it's grayed out, doesn't mean it's licensing, it's something else. And you have content marking, and where the label get protection, this is where you define the protection, right? Now, so this is the confidential open label. But if you go Microsoft default label guide and then default label created Microsoft, you may see there is a control access enabled. But I'm also in my, I built a script based on the that best practice deployment guide. In the PowerShell, what I did, I actually made it with no control access. Why? Because I don't want, when I start, and the default label is going to be confidential, is going to make all the new documents confidential, protected day one, because when you protect the document, the first things you need to think about is co-authoring, because by default, co-authoring is not enabled, right? So that means if two people are going to work on the same documents, then you have protection. You get so many calls. Okay, I can't edit my documents. And then the answer is, oh, enable co-authoring. Why we haven't done that? So yeah, we can do it easy, just one click. I have the option, even when I created PowerShell, initially I had it enabled, and then I said, oh, I should actually make it opt-in. Why? Because that's a decision I never make for any customer unless talked to. Because if there is, what happened when you enable co-authoring on the label, you are actually changing the metadata of the file, right? And then if there is any tools, there may not be chance of having a tool using those metadata is low, because even the backup tools or archive tools from the last few years updated to use with the new metadata, but just in case, right? I don't want to guess and say, okay, even if 1% or 1,000, I want to talk to customers, make sure you want it, then we can enable for you. And that's why highly confidential, I have the protection as a baseline enabled. But for the baseline, we worked on says, okay, no protection. And when you add protection, what happens is the extra control you get. So configure this, you can assign permission now or let the user assign permission. And in the, again, the, deployment I have using that, for that partner I had, and even in my script, I have one label, which is with specified users. That's where we use this one. So in that case, we use, even in confidential, because it's not default, we have protection in place. Now, when I go assign permission, so there are some control here. Let's just keep them as default. But what you can do is, for example, all users and group in your organization. So when you do this, what it means is, like, even if this file labeled with this label, you give it to someone else, email to someone else, even if it's not DLP blocking to sending it out, the other person who receive it should be part of the organization to be able to open it, right? That's what this label does. Doesn't matter where it is, it's offline, it's copied on the Mac or mobile, whatever, doesn't work. The user need to authenticate with Entra to be able to do that. And then you also have dynamic watermarking option here as part of label, double encryption. Dynamic watermarking is an interesting one because, someone may say, okay, then someone can actually go and take a screenshot or take a photo from a screen when for that content. But dynamic watermark, what it does is, like, when you open the documents, it shows the username on, on the background. Even if you take picture, it shows the IP address and the user actually who took the picture, right? Of course, you may next step is going to be Photoshop, but that's different conversation. We don't go that far. But that's also that's a dynamic watermarking. So as you can see here, it's like, footer, header. This is all inside the label, and then inside the label you can define auto labeling, but auto labeling is the baseline. I'm not using it. And then what policy you want to even have based on the label for SharePoint sites, teams, and all those control is there. But again, I'm not going to dive into this one because this can be, this is beyond baseline. But there is content. If you have someone says, oh, I want to have this team policy based on this, then yes, you can. Now, if you have the label available for SharePoint, so what happened is, let me just go to active sites and just show you an example and answer the question we had. Here, I go to, for example, this SharePoint sites. And here, if I go to settings, I can see actually this sensitivity label for the SharePoint sites, right? This is not that default label for the documents we upload, but this is about this SharePoint site is for all employees. So technically what it means is, like, we prefer not to have confidential documents uploaded to these SharePoint sites, right? Or used in these SharePoint sites. If you add the highly confidential, which is more than the confidential here, then you may get notification and alerts about, but it's not going to block or something. It's just about auditing. What you can do with the default for the content added to the site, this is where you set it. So you go, this is document library, right? So this is about, you upload the documents to document library, and this is where you set it. So you go to documents, and then you have the library settings. And here is, you define what label you want to be default. So when you set this, means any file uploaded here is going to get this label. Hopefully this answers your question. So that's about default label. And Tom, you can bring other questions you want. I'm just going to jump onto the publishing policy.
Yes, so Paul's answering a lot of the questions in the chat as well, so I can see him typing away.
Okay,
yeah,
great. Thank you.
There's a good one from Tassif. Is there a Purview readiness checklist specifically for Copilot rollout, i.e. the minimum labeling and DLP posture before enabling Copilot and a tenant? Also, we're rolling out Purview across SMB clients, including defense-aligned customers. For our defense customers with DISP obligations, where does the SMB baseline fall short, and what should we layer on top? Big question for you, Amir. You can have that one.
Yes, yeah. It's again, it's there are Purview has compliance manager. You can select your baseline standard you want to look. If you have DSP or something there, you can go there. We don't have time to go. I go to there, but you can run assessment on your Purview deployment in the compliance manager to say, ISO 27001, for example. assess my purview or my environment, or you have any other standard, you just go there. With the purview, you get 3 assessments for free. So you decide about which assessment you're going to run from Compliance Manager to do the audit for you. The reason we also built something I'm going to show you. We are working on a tool, and we love to also, have your feedback later on that. So I'm going to show actually what we did on those parts, but baseline it may not cover. What I usually do, for example, in that last project I had, I told them, let's run zero trust assessment, because zero trust assessment, we try to cover so many things there. And run zero trust assessment. By zero trust assessment, I mean this. Let me just quickly show you. ZT workshop should be this one. Yeah. So when you go here, this one has identity, device, data, network, infrastructure, security, operation, and AI. Right. So it has these 7 pillars. So for example, if you go here, you see all what it checks. So there is a script, run it, and then it gives you this. And also this is like a checklist you can track, as your project management tools for the rollout. But zero trust assessment is something I recommend to run before even run, to deploy baseline to see what is changing. But there is also more. We also created this tool, which is data security guided assistance, and available. I share the link. And here is like, you can go, if you go to, for example, start labeling tool, it goes to industry, and then you have, let's say, APAC, Oceania, you have, you are using PII, HR records, and then you can select Australia. I mean, something maybe missed here, you can let us know so we can add more here. But there are, again, it gives you some, there are some questions here, and then it gives you some recommendation based on the label. There is also, if you go back to this tool, it's a new one. We just released this. And then if you go to Combine Flow, it asks questions based on, again, different, criteria about to add DLP policy, or what do you think about DLP to create those, right? So this is, we try to combine all different standards and the requirements different from different region to build this. But I'm sure there is so much we can do more and to add to this one. But let me actually share all the links, and then so everyone can, whoever can share with the group here. So you can just put in the chat. So many links. Another 4 links. Okay, so yeah, I mean, to be honest, I can't tell about how much covered from that standard you mentioned, but again, Compliance Manager is the one you can look at, and zero trust assessment. And if you are using this baseline and then you see something has to be there, I'd love to hear. And then if it's something can be scalable for multiple, because if it's not about conversation with each customer going to be different, then we can add it to actually docs. After label, the next step is label publishing policy, right? What is the publishing policy looks like, how it looks like. So from here you decide about what is going to be available to user. And all of this is defined in the script and also in the PowerPoints. So here, I'm targeting all users, and then user must provide justification to remove a label or large. This is important. We don't want to block users from downgrading. And then there is also this option, require users to apply label. So that means if someone open a document and then there is no label, they should apply the label. So when you do that, I mean, I learned about something new. It was new to me. So I was saying, why we are not even check this? In my default deployment, even if I'm going to the script deployment, I'm actually having this checked. But I'm now going to update my script or my flow even in based on the learning in the PowerPoints, just like for best practice, to have a separate deployment policy as a higher priority. We uncheck this one. Why? Because when you have working with the documents and you want to save as PDF, there is no issue with this, but there is a challenge here. If your customer insists, I wants to have the print to PDF, not save as PDF, then this is not going to work. So this is blocking print to PDF because you requires to have label, right? And then print to PDF doesn't have the option to set the label, but save as PDF inherit the label. There is no issue. So just this small, piece of things. This was my learning because, and I still recommend. What I did now, I created label publishing policy, and I'm creating the second policy. And if they say, I have 2 users in the business, they want to have to do this, then I say, okay, I have a group for that. Add there, they get the second policy, which has this unchecked, and those are the exception group, right? Again, it's up to you how you want to make a decision on this, but just so you know. And then what is the default label for documents? This is where you define it. And what is the default label for email? It's public because you don't want by default, as you know, that the boundary, you block the users sending email out. On default, email by default should go out. It should be able to go out. But if someone attached highly confidential or confidential, the email become confidential. That's the policy. And the rest is about, you can do the same for calendar, for groups, for Viva, for Fabric, Power BI, and name the policy. That's the label publishing. Okay, so
Amir, are we
yes.
able? There's a question in the Q&A on video file labeling, which evidently a preview feature.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about it. Enabling.
Video, yes. Video based on the, there is, to be honest, I haven't looked at, there is some updates on the label. I haven't worked on that to see what's the extent of the video. I know there is something on the label.
Yeah.
I can get more
I've done it by creating a hash of the video file, but it breaks as soon as you edit the video file. And then Adam's got a follow-up question. As an extension to this question, for non-Microsoft Office files, do you recommend using the AIP or Purview Information Protection desktop app or scanner, I think we mean there, to label files, e.g. zip, DWG, MP4s, etc.?
I mean, for the non-Microsoft file, I think most of the modern one already support labeling by itself, but preferably we want to avoid. But again, if there is there is no way, and then that's only just if there is, the product is still not updated. These days a lot of vendor already updated and supporting it. But if not, yes, you want to have that AIP.
Yeah, I know for CAD/CAM there are extensions. Third-party extensions that you can use to apply labels to CAD/CAM files.
Yeah.
With zip files, I'd question whether you actually label the zip file or label the files within the zip. Yeah.
It's because zip is not, zip is just a container, right? It's okay. Let me jump onto I'm not going to, so when we talk about label, we talked about, automatic assign the label, but there is, there are other more things here. I don't have time. It's not go deep into everything, so be familiar with trainable classifier, sensitive input type, EDM classifier. These are the one which actually it's about the type of the content where you can use them to label automatically, right? So for example, if this file has a code, this file has a credit card, this file has a Medicare information, think of that, and then EDM or some other, sensitive info type, you go there, fingerprints it, if this document is actually the superannuation form, the HR sent to the user, or this is the ATO form. These are, something, there are different ways to create, but again, those are the capability of the MIP, but it's, think of like using all of this at the end to create and label the documents. And of course, in the DLP, we can use them. Okay, so let's jump out and let's go to the DLP now. So we built all of this, and now what we are going to do with that was the boundary control. This is where you come here and then you define your policies. So the policies where you define about if the documents is, I give you one, let me just show you example. Let me see if I have another demo tenant here, a smaller one. This is actually my another tenant, which I'm actually deploying all of this with the script. So for example, this one is SB SharePoint Online, and is, let me just sign in. I need to enter the key. I quickly show you this, and then we don't have much time remaining, but let's see. So what we are doing here is about deciding what can go out or not. I explained that in this slide. So this is the decision you make. We already recommended something in the slide. And also, if you want to test it in the demo tenants to create all of this, I give you a tool where you can actually deploy it. So what it does here is like, let me just quickly show you, because I don't want to explain the whole policy here, but I want to show you one part of this policy which is key. So when you create the DLP, you always think, okay, what you're going to target. For example, you can go M365 Copilot and then tell if it's confidential, Copilot shouldn't processing it. Or if someone type credit card, it shouldn't go and then follow the prompt and then find answer for that, right? So that's something you can do with this one, for example. But and I created example in that. If you can see the example is in the PowerPoint in the PowerShell script, and what it does is this. So you define what sensitivity, if this is the condition. So you have the using sensitivity labels to say if the document is internal exception, all employees, and then this is the action you take. Summary is that there are so many things here. Again, I'm happy to, if you want to reach out to me or have another call to go more detail, but the goal is here is like all the label MIP conversation we had to build those labels and define the sensitive input type to use in our condition here, and then to take action. We want to block it or what a simulation. And so you can start with simulation and turn it on when you have when you are ready, right? And how do you know how you can tell if you are ready or not, or what insight you can share? You can go to Activity Explorer, and here is where you can actually see all the DLP action, and then you can even export it to CSV, and then create Power BI to show to your customers, right? There is so many options available here. This tenant, this demo, I don't have anything here to show you, but you see all. If someone downgrade, if it's share something outside, all is going to be logged here. What we have, it's I want to use maximum time I can. Let me just jump onto this one. So what I also want to show you is this one. This is in this link I have, this is showing the PowerShell script I created based on this recommendation. Again, this is still in my repo. I'm working on, actually right now, I'm working on sending to Microsoft repo. Again, PowerShell is not supported. It's just showing you how you can think of, how you can deploy it, because if you follow this, for example, the scenarios, I have covered all the scenario I was talking about, what needs to be enabled. Configuration reference shows you actually how the configuration being created. And also, if I show you, for example, deployment framework here, this one, it shows, in the configure side. So you have, prepare is about how to prepare your environment, how to connect, about this PowerShell, and then how to assess. And then, but this part shows you actually what is happening with the deployment, right? So you have tenant settings, you have sensitivity labels, you have DLP policies, you have retention, you have Copilot, all is going to be created. You can go back and then check actually what's been deployed, but what happened here is all in simulation, right? And then later you come back, and then if you follow this framework, you can safely deploy the Purview with those baseline, and then come back and then enable with one-to-one conversation with customers you have based on the data you collected. And it easy. Let me show you one more thing here, actually. So it's like, if you want to have the visual of what is actually this does, I created this something, even support team, if you look at this, they know what actually happened after the deployment. So it's like what is enabled by default, what is optional, what is auto detect based on business premium or Purview Suite or E5, and then what is going to be impact. So you want to be careful about deploying it, and it shows the labels, what is the default. And what is, you know, you can actually see what actually have on all the labels, where the label is available, files, emails, not group and site, file, email, group and sites, and then, and you know, what is default for new email. So it's this explain actually, it helps you how to think about the deployment of the Purview, but you can also see here, for example, again, another guide. So by just going through this, you get the idea of, you know, what's behind, or this all of, you know, conversation we had today about MIP DLP. There is IRM I haven't covered, but IRM is like, I focused on the one can be automated for multiple customers at the same time. IRM is another feature in the Purview, which is great, but it's like, think of like if someone copying so many files, you want to assign a risk to that user. If someone is leaving the company and then you want to monitor it, and then based on the leave date, and then it's like if suddenly the user behavior change, copy thousands of files to OneDrive, personal OneDrive, and then you want to assign risk and then take action, that's IRM. But why it's not in this one? Because I highly, we are releasing a new version of deployment practice guide, the data slide, in end of July. By end of July, you should be available, and we included IRM into that one. So you can, when you come back in, you know, in a month, you can see actually we added IRM. It's not in the script because it's not, there's no API for it today. And so it's like, it's not deployed as part of this. It's a great addition. I highly recommend to look at it when it's available.
And to clarify, IRM is insider risk management, not information rights management.
Thank you, Tom.
You got me really confused there when you started talking Purview.
Yes.
IRM.
someone was talking about IRM, and then I had to come back. You know, when this, I did the same exactly what you did, and says, you know, IRM is insider risk management, not information rights management. So yeah, thanks. But yeah, it's you know, there are so many things I can cover, but again, I had 1 hour. I wanted to focus on what's important today, and the approach I took, and I used this approach to deploy this to 100 tenants, and then that was, I'm happy we didn't have, you know, we have all the insight, the partner has all the insights they need to go further to enable those simulation to enable. And I learned something about it, showed you my learning about that, especially that print to PDF one, which is very small maybe, but again, you know, when I say zero impact on end users, didn't want to have, but there was few users with that print to PDF. But again, we always learn from, you know, implementing, and it's all about not being scared of, you know, complexity of Purview. I heard the early days, and I'm hoping all these documents or link I shared with you help you to be more confident to start rolling out Purview, because 2 years ago, 1 year ago, it was so difficult, even when there wasn't much interest, or, you know, now with the AI, all those challenges, you know, labeling is critical. So you don't want to delay the project because you don't know, your customer don't know what to label for. So I say, start with default label, have those policy and simulation, AI governance. There are some settings is not in the slide, maybe even in the script. So for example, we need device onboarded. We need, you know, right? So it's like if you have Defender for endpoints, device onboarding to Purview is just one click. You want a Purview browser extension to be enabled. In scenarios, you may want to think about Edge for business, for BYD devices. There are scenarios like you want to have unallowed browsers to be set. I have in a script, but again, it may not be in the slide. Hopefully, we are going to update it. So it's like we are not just blocking the user who are good, doing compliant. You want to think about the user who are not compliant too, because if you don't follow all of this, we're just applying the policy to the people who are compliant. I don't want to add anything more. There are so many things I can talk about, but I have to stop some. So thanks.
And I think that the last question that was sort of like asked, you know, can DLP be applied to non-Microsoft products, speaks to that there is big overlap. You know, how do we control information flow to non-sanctioned apps? That's going to be Defender for Cloud Apps, part of it. And what you mentioned around the browser extensions for AI, you know, that's all part of what falls within Purview, but not particularly under a DLP policy. It's more
thanks for
the
bringing
other
it up.
parts of it.
Yeah, I don't talk about this one, but I highly recommend for anyone talks about any other generative AI or AI solutions like Claude or GPT Enterprise. Look at this one. This collection policy is helping you with getting insight to non-Microsoft AI solutions, like you want to get Claude or any other you have in mind. Look at this and maybe just homework for you.
You should be rolling out Scout anyway, so
Yeah.
that's our next big issue.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the Intune for Scout requirements?
Intune is I think for Intune is about deploying extension, right? For the browser is the one. There are ways to block application on the endpoint device if you need. Then you use Intune for example, unallowed browser. But unallowed browser for device onboarded to this, it can be done through the Purview. You don't need Intune for that. But we are going to hear more about Intune and Purview together because now we are, you may heard, even it's publicly available. So it's not something I'm hiding. So it's like Purview and Intune is it's sort of like under one umbrella from, so we are going to see more integration into these two products.
Great. Thanks, Amir. I think we are running a bit of overtime, but I feel like in the future sessions, having Amir from security engineering here, we probably need at least 1.5 hour for the audience. I see there's so many questions. Some of the questions is really valuable feedback for us. Such like Josh asked the question for the video files, enable the DLP. I share some links there, but I think there's definitely things we still need to develop. I think potentially, Michael, we can maybe having Amir with us for a series of sessions rather than one session cover everything around Purview, but potentially cover small pieces as a series moving to FY27.
Yeah, for sure. I think we'll close it off. We were going to talk a little about services, but we've run to time. So thank you very much for joining. We will record this. We will send out the materials that Amir has shared today, at least the ones that we're allowed to. I think it's pretty much all of it that will help you with deployment. And please reach out to your partner account manager, BSM, Sri, myself, or the Microsoft guys on the call today, and we'll follow up. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Amir.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Enjoy
everyone.
the rest of the week.
Cheers.
Thanks.
All right, let's end the event. All right.
Brilliant, Amir.